John, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good. So you have a new solo album coming out in January called The Empyrean,
hmm
which is quite an experience. I've been listening to it all week. Now, The Empyrean, if I understand it right, means the place of the highest heaven. Is that correct?
I understand it to mean the highest point in heaven.
Okay. Are you particularly religious? Why did you come up with this term for this record?
My religious point of view is something that I can't really talk about. It goes against my belief system to publicly talk about my own spiritual beliefs. In the case of the record, I think I was more using the highest point in heaven as a symbol for the things in life that we're all reaching for, and those things that are sort of out of our grasp, but yet there's some spark inside us that compels us to want to reach for them and to want to bring ourselves to greater heights, whether it's on an instrument or whether it's whatever it is. As human beings, we just have this need to reach and to reach new heights, and often they're totally out of our grasp, but that doesn't make it any less reasonable to reach for it. There's always a quote, the writer William Burroughs used to always quote, which was that there's no goal more worth fighting to attain than, I'm paraphrasing, but it's that there's no goal more worthy of fighting to attain than immortality, and it's just, while I don't think that it's good to always be sort of believing that the grass is greener on the other side, I really believe in pushing yourself to reach heights that may seem far off, but to just push yourself to get there. And in my case, that's all with music. I've just always tried to reach new heights, and it's also one of the themes of the record that sometimes in your journey, giving up sometimes can be giving up for a period of time, or can actually be a way of regenerating enough energy to keep pushing yourself higher. And musically, and in the theme of the lyrics, the music on my record repeatedly keeps sort of going from a murky kind of low to a peak, and then down from the peak, and then to another low, and then keeps reaching up again and going higher and higher, and then going down again. And for me, that's like a form of breathing. There's been times in my life where I just painted and stopped even playing music, and there's been times in my life where I stopped thinking so creatively on my instrument and started thinking purely technically. And I think that all those things had a value, even though it's not something I'd want to, there's not things you desire to do. But I think in the process of trying to go up and up and up, I don't think just solidly doing nothing but going up and up and constantly reaching and pushing yourself, I think eventually that produces a kind of strain where you won't be able to go up any higher, where you can actually, in the long run, gain more momentum if you listen to your clock inside, and you may have to occasionally give up, or in a symbolic sense, you might have to die in order to be reborn.
What I can definitely hear on this record is you're constantly changing your style, constantly evolving, actually disregarding one style after you've done it, both as an instrumentalist and as a vocalist. How do you go about that process?
Well, I don't think it is disregarding, obviously, because I really love the whole record from beginning to end, but it's more just switching it up and changing and trying to approach each song differently, and trying to sort of, like in singing, like try to sort of find a different character for each song. Right. I think it really helped me to, nobody was around when I recorded my vocals, so being by myself, I found myself, it was much easier to sort of have fun with it and do a lot of takes until I really was having more and more fun each time, as opposed to when you do it with an engineer, a lot of the time you can't deal with the humiliation of having to do more than a couple of takes or whatever, and it gets frustrating if you have to do any more after that. But when you're by yourself, sometimes you do like 15 takes and the 15th one is like, well, yeah, So I found myself having more and more fun with it every time that I did it, and messing around more every time and stuff. As far as soloing, I usually try to have some sort of a concept in my head of an approach or a sound, or I think music should be something alive and free, and I don't think that people should just sort of rest on their laurels, or at least I don't like for myself to rest on my laurels or to repeat myself.
Did you record the record at home?
Uh-huh.
It's a dichotomy. It has a very intimate feel, of course, but there's this huge live drum sound that one would get from like a big-time studio album.
Well, it's big-time studio, you know. I mean, it's not... I think it's a myth that you need like a 15-foot ceiling to get a good drum sound. Our drum room is pretty small and oddly shaped, and it's got a really live sound, and we got some amazing drum sounds just in the dining room. I don't think studios are all that. I think it was a really poor misconception that I had for a long time, that for something to be a real record, you had to do it in a recording studio, because anybody at home, just by collecting gear piece by piece, you can make things as good sounding as what they do in a studio. And especially if you're doing all the engineering yourself as a musician, the more you play a part in the mixing, the miking, the twiddling of the knobs and stuff, it's your opportunity to put more and more of your own expression in the music. You know, in other words, if you play a guitar solo, if you're also pushing the faders and EQing it and putting different kinds of reverbs on it at different points, it can be an extension of the same feeling that you played it with. Whereas when somebody else is doing it in these reputable big studios with highly paid engineers, they don't know what you were trying to express. They're not on the inside of the music, they're on the outside of it. And
right.
Then, to me, the final thing ends up being thinner in cases like that. Yeah, I think you can get a good sound anywhere for drums, you know, like Motown, where they recorded all that shit.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Tiny little room, you know, it just doesn't matter.
Well, I was particularly impressed by what you do with your voice on so many of the tracks. It reminded me of John Lennon, who was constantly changing the sound of his voice.
Yeah. With anything, like, I need to hear, with music, the music that I like the way it sounds is where there's constant sonic variation going on, where all the sounds are, where there's movement going on. I think even just in the nature of playing a series of notes on the guitar or a series of chords, it's change that affects us. It's that sense of regularity and at the same time of change and variation that's that magical quality in music that just makes it constantly mean new things to us. And as a song goes on, where the emotional response is constantly going in unexpected places. And so I feel like the sound, with all the technology that's come about in the last 100 years of being able to record stuff, that's the thing I like to take advantage of, is to be able to go from one atmosphere to another atmosphere, and to go from one type of vocal sound to another, and to make it seem far away, to make it seem close, to make it seem small, to make it seem big, and to create surreal effects with, flipping the tape backwards and doing weird things with reverbs and delays and stuff. I like to hear music changing all the time, So it's like when I hear records that are just mixed in a straight ahead way, where everything's just balanced with each other and nothing's too soft and nothing's too loud. It's just boring to me. It's not what I want to hear. And when we were mixing this record, my main thing was just to have something that I could blast on the stereo system late at night and trip out to. Just have something where you're just like, whoa, how did that happen? How's that possible? I don't at all record to like impress people or to try to do something good or something. It's more just like I want to make something that I like, that I would want to hear, And in rock music, my favorite mixed records are always these ones that like, that where the artist had some say, whether someone like John Lennon who was real adamant about having different vocal sounds in the Beatles or whatever, or Jimi Hendrix, on Electric Ladyland, or George Clinton on the first few Funkadelic records. I like it when they just take their same musical sense that makes them sing or play in the way that they do, and they apply it to the mixing console. So that was totally my approach for this, was just to trip it out as much as possible.
Now, I'm a big fan of Johnny Marr, but I must say I could not tell at all which track he is playing on. So can you tell me which track he's on?
He's on 2 tracks. He's on Heaven, and he's on Central.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess in Heaven, none of the guitars are me until the second verse. Like he's basically doing the first verse and the first chorus.
Alrighty.
And the first chorus is like a breakdown kind of chorus, if I'm remembering correctly. He basically does the first verse and the first chorus, and I do the second verse and the second chorus, and the rest of it's all me. He's playing multiple guitars there. He messed around a lot, and he basically, we just had one night. So while he was here touring with Modest Mouse, so we just he just heard the songs once and just fiddled around for a few hours, and then when we mixed, we figured out how to make it work in the structure of the song. And that was our approach for all the songs, was to kind of record a lot of tracks and figure out in the mix how we were gonna. I mean, I say we, it was me, but figuring out in the mix which instruments are going to be used in which section, and doing a lot of tape edits and stuff like that. And then on the other one, Central, he did an acoustic guitar that's
okay.
strumming.
Yeah.
And wait! Did I say Heaven? I meant Enough of Me.
Okay.
Yeah. Enough of Me is the one where he plays on the first verse and the first chorus. He played on Heaven, but we didn't use it. Maybe you should print that. but Enough of Me, he's on the first verse and first chorus, and on Central, he plays acoustic rhythm guitar, and he did this really neat harmonic thing, a really interesting hand technique and it has some echo on it and stuff. There might be one other part on Central that he plays, but I can't remember. I haven't heard it in a while.
Now, did you give him any kind of direction, or did you
just
play him
that's the thing. I've kind of learned from making records for a long time that if you really want to capture a good energy on a record,
mm-hmm.
it's best to just, first of all, to have only people playing with you who already would have a sense of what you're doing and are already sort of have a soul connection to what you're doing,
Right.
You don't want to have somebody just because they can technically play, but, you want to have somebody who understands your point of view that you write music from, And if you have that, the best thing to do is to just let them do whatever they do, there's a little, like when Josh and I are doing stuff, we have a little verbal communication about it, but basically, he understands my music and knows where it's coming from, so I like to just let him do whatever he does, and then I just figure out during the mix. It's so easy in the mix. Sometimes when people are too quick to sort of judge something, that doesn't work right for this section, or that's more than that's taking over too much. They're not using their heads and thinking ahead with how much you can do when you're mixing. With EQ and effects and treatments and stuff, you just wrangle it in there.
Yeah.
You just sort of form it, and I think when I was first making records, I was too quick to judge things just based on the first listen, and I've learned over the years that if you've got a good energy in the room, the spirits of music, or the gods of music, do their thing with it. There's a plan that's much more elaborate and much more complex and wonderful than anything that you could plan out in your head. If you just let the energies flow.
Now,
so I didn't say anything to Johnny. I was just watching him come up with stuff. It was really educational, because I've learned so much from his playing. To see that he wasn't, because I come at playing from a real, the theoretical symbols for things are real prominent in my mind all the time when I make music.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I'm totally breaking all the rules and playing atonal notes and all that, I know what intervals they are, and when I'm building chord upon chord, I know what the intervallic relationship is, and with him, he doesn't have that. I think he just learned to play music from doing it and from playing along with old records and stuff. And so to see the way that in his own mind he's created his own mental symbols for the same things that I use the theoretical symbols for, but in so many ways I learned how to use things like 13ths and 11ths and 9ths in a musical context from studying his playing, because he has really complex chord progressions in like Smith songs and stuff like that, and to find out that he's always been just sort of going by his instinct and going by his own mental pictures and stuff. It was really neat to watch it just fall into place,
Now, I'm fascinated. Is it possible for a player as yourself to turn that off, though?
There's no reason to. I think there's a period of time when a person first learns those things, it produces a kind of mental strain where the instinctual part of the brain isn't as capable anymore of dominating the brain, and the technical part ends up being overemphasized and taking up all the brain space you have room for. You use up all the brain power you have available to compensate all these technical relationships and things like that. But once it becomes the same thing as talking or something, once it becomes the same thing as what the word man means, and it's not a strain to think of a man and to have the word man in your head. There's just eventually they just become one thing. The symbol of the thing and the thing itself just become one thing. The word major third and the sound of it and the look of it on guitar just all become one thing in your brain.
You might be using a bunch of different guitars on the album, but if I had to pick a predominant sound, it does sound like a Strat mostly.
Yeah, that's all I'm using. I don't think I played any other guitars. It's hard to remember. I might have used an SG on the solo of Central, but I think I might have just made the Strat sound like an SG with an English muffin electro-harmonics effect. I basically used all the same gear that I use in the Chili Peppers, just the Marshall Major and Jubilee and my 62 Strat and my 57 Strat.
There's so many cool sounds on this record, but if I had to pick one, it's the solo in the song Enough of Me.
I think that's my favorite one, too.
There you go. What kind of overdrive are you using on that?
Yeah, I think that's an English muffin, and I didn't play that through the Marshalls. I played it through a Fender Bassman.
Okay.
Because I wanted to get real low frequencies.
Yeah.
And wanted to be standing next to the amp and not be too far away from the control room. So that was that. Yeah, when I was on tour, just messing around in my hotel room, I started to think of that style of playing. I was just messing around a lot with instead of thinking of one note as one note that leads to the next note that leads to the next note, to sort of divide the guitar into pieces. So you're playing low notes alternately with high notes that have a stretch of a couple of octaves at least, and then it forces your brain to have to sort of think in two directions at once, even though the notes aren't happening at the same time. Which I remember on my first solo album, I did a lot of that, where I was playing acoustic guitar parts where they kind of had a bass note and a high note that were at least like an octave and a third away from each other or whatever. But in this case, it's a single note guitar line, but your brain is sort of thinking of the whole neck. Once you do it for a while, you start to just think of the whole neck as one thing, and you don't stay in those boxy patterns that guitar players tend to stay in, And so it was just a fun, at first it was just like a fun mental challenge to think that way, and then by the time I played it on the album, I had been doing it a lot in my room. I did a little on stage, but it's so different from the way I normally played that I wasn't really enjoying doing it in the band.
Well, it's an amazing solo, just totally mind-blowing.
Thanks, man.
In the time we have remaining, we have so many reader questions, so I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. A reader named John Franco 888 wants to know, Chad from the Chili Peppers is doing his group Chickenfoot. Would you ever consider doing a quote-unquote super group of this nature? No. I like making music by myself. I wouldn't play. If I played with. First of all, I've never heard of Chickenfoot, and I didn't even know Chad was doing that, so I don't know who that is or why he's doing it. I'm not comparing myself to him. I'm just saying that for me, if I play with people, it's 100% because of the musical relationship, and I have no interest in sort of. I don't want to sound like I'm comparing myself to him because I don't know what he's doing. It's just I wouldn't play with people because they were also stars and we would go up on stage and be stars together or something. It's just that's not me. And I usually find that I don't relate to people who think that way because it's less about music and it's more about who they are or something. And I'm really I just don't think. I think kind of in general the personality has been overemphasized and music has been underemphasized, and it's definitely my intent to do everything that I can for the rest of my life, just to think of music as a living being and to think what I can do for music and not to think what music can do for me.
and I hope that in my own small way that I can spread that philosophy around a little bit, because I really think too much emphasis has been placed on the star, and I think music is very complete without all the crap that goes along with like fame and ego and all that stuff. Photos and videos and all that stuff. I just think music is sufficient unto itself, and nothing could be more complete, and all those things have just been invented to sell it by business people, and I just don't think that music needs it, and I think that in a lot of ways people experiment less when they have their fame to protect, or their income to protect, or their way of life to protect, and so much emphasis ends up and I feel like they do less experimentation with music when you're thinking that way. I know I did, I'm 100% about just thinking in terms of what can be done with what new approaches can be taken to making music, and where are some possibilities that people haven't explored yet. Not like what can I do that'll knock people's socks off. You know what I mean? It's like that's just where I'm at. It's like I love Blind Faith. There's definitely super groups that I think are awesome. But at this point in time, I think it's just necessary to really emphasize where the possibilities are in music, and not anything about like this band will be huge.
A reader named Telefaster wants to know, when you pick up the guitar, do you ever have times when nothing seems to be coming out right? If so, what do you do?
That doesn't really happen to me, because I kind of care more about studying music and exploring possibilities than I do about doing anything right. If there's not an idea there when I pick up a guitar, I'm just going to be learning stuff off records, or studying a chord book, or learning a classical piece out of a book, or mostly since I was 12, I just learned stuff off records, and I don't put that pressure on my relationship to the instrument to walk over to it and to figure I'm going to play something brilliant. I practice so much and listen so much that eventually somebody like does something on a record that strikes you, or you realize that some sort of combination of intervals or some certain kind of rhythmic phrase like strikes a chord in you. Ideas come forth from there. It's really it's the whole principle of the way they put music together in hip hop and stuff. You just take little pieces from different things and put them in a new context and reorganize them and bend them and slice them up, and then there's your ideas. I think that kind of stuff only happens when people like have too much of a emphasis in their approach to wanting a result.
Right.
Having those kind of goals and that result-oriented thinking is real limiting to what you can do, and real limiting on how much fun you can have when you're doing it. It's important to remember that there's an endless supply of creativity available in the universe. That creative force that all music has come from is plentiful, and it's never going to run out. And as long as you don't psych yourself out by putting pressure on yourself and by judging everything that you do, if you just listen to music and explore the possibilities of your instrument, it's just always going to be there. You don't have to worry about it. It only happens when you make too much of a agenda of trying to do something that's going to blow people away or something. Like if you just remember that you're just always just going to be an unimportant person, no matter how much people may tell you that you're important. It's never the person that's important, and nobody should be intimidated by stars like Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen or whoever. It's just like those people, they're all just little guys who love music, and what they do has been great only in as much as they love music, and in as much as they practice their instrument a lot and gave a lot of love to it, As long as you do that stuff, you don't need to worry about the result, You'll get there when you're meant to, and you'll come up with things when you're meant to, and you'll have a good time the whole time as long as you're studying all the brilliant stuff. We're so lucky we have CDs and records to study, and it's an opportunity to think the way somebody else was thinking. When you play along with something, you're actually like almost like experiencing the same moment that they experienced. Sure. And feeling what they felt and doing what they're doing. It's like a mirror through it's like a mirror through like 40 years of time or whatever. If you learn something that happened 40 years ago, you know, it was a little moment in the studio, and then you're recreating that moment with your instrument because you play the same instrument as them. It's amazing, you know. It's all like an incredible gift, and nobody should put that burden on music to feed their ego in the way that they want it when they expect that everything that comes out of them should be something like fantastic, you know.
A reader by the name of Porcelain says, I've been playing the guitar for a long time. I admire your style. I want to know, in your opinion, is theory necessary to play the guitar, or is playing guitar emotionally enough?
I definitely think it's enough to just use your emotions. I think a lot of brilliant music's been made like that. It just depends on what you want to do, you know. It's like, I don't think somebody should learn theory just because I say it's a good idea, but for me, it's been a really good idea, and it just gives me more insight into the music that I learn, and I don't think of each note and each relationship in a given piece of music as just being something that came out of thin air, which I think it might seem magical when you're a kid to, you know, I remember how it sounded when I used to listen to Kiss when I was a kid, and to me it just sounded like it all came out of thin air. I had no idea how any of it was being done or what the tonal or rhythmic relationships were, you know. It would just all sound like it came out of thin air, and that was a nice feeling. But I think if I would have remained seeing it that way, I think a lot of people, even when they learn stuff, when their brain doesn't find some way of finding a mental symbol that equals the intervallic relationship and the rhythmic relationships, I think that tendency to think of it as all just coming out of thin air and all as being kind of unrelated, I think that can be limiting. And I think if a person's going to be really good at it, like Jimi Hendrix was, or Johnny Marr is, or, you know, the guys in Fugazi are, it's like you in some way you find a mental symbol. It might not. It's one of those mental pictures, like if I try to picture the feeling of metal in my mind, or the feeling of a certain type of wood in my mind. There's a mental symbol for it. I don't actually see the feeling. The sense of touch isn't something that you can see in most cases, but there is a symbol of it in my head, and I think that that's the kind of thing a person has to develop, and it just takes a lot of practicing and a lot of thinking about music and a lot of giving love to music. I think music's always there for anybody who puts in the time and the work, and I think there's many paths to get to very similar places. But I really love learning theory because I can hear, if you put on a song, I immediately recognize the intervallic relationships to where I've learned it already without even picking up my guitar. And yeah, well, you know, it's possible that somebody can do that without knowing those things, but it's all just so clear to me, you know. It's
right.
Like, I'm really grateful for that, and I don't think it would be as sharp of a sense as it is without knowing those things, you know. And I think it's only been a recent phenomenon in a lot of ways amongst people who really work hard at music that they've gone so far with it without learning things, because there was a time where if you really wanted to do something big, other than like folk music or something, you had to learn how to read, and you had to learn how to write music, and you had to, you know, learn harmony and learn how to orchestrate it. And those things didn't limit, you know, people like Beethoven and Mozart and Stravinsky, and they only help. Like I said, but like I said, you do have to go through a period of strain for a while, and to really get the ideas digested, you might have to put your creativity on the side for a little while, you know. And if you're not willing to do that, then it's not a good idea to learn it. But if you're 15 years old or 16 years old or 17 years old, there's just no reason not to learn that stuff, because yeah, you might have a couple of years of not being as creative as you were before, but how much you're able to do with it once the ideas are digested and then it's not a strain to think about them anymore, you know, it's wonderful.
Our reader by the name of Cradle88 says, you seem to love all kinds of music, funk, dance, hip-hop, etc. Is there any particular kind of genre that you've never warmed up to?
Well, I don't really think of music in genres, but I like it when they play off of each other, and I really hear the spirit of music more than the formulas that connect two people of the same style. Mainly, I just don't like it when it sounds to me like music is being made in order to impress people, or in order to please business people, or in order to please the masses or whatever. it doesn't sound good to me when it sounds like it was more important to somebody to do something that was going to make them famous or make them loved by people than that they were doing something where there was just a harmonious relationship between them and the creative force of music, you know. And that's a real apparent thing to me when it sounds like somebody's making music for the wrong reasons. I hear it right away. I think this is another thing that, besides the personality, that too much emphasis is placed on is the style of music that somebody's doing, or the way they dress, or the radio station they would be played on, or the section they're in the record store. Like, to me, the real important element of music is the energy behind it, and a sensitive person who loves music can feel that. And you know, you just know the difference when you hear a band at a point in their career where they were doing it for the right reasons, and at the point in their career where they were doing it for the wrong reasons. It's plainly apparent, you know, and that's the style of music I don't like, is when I just feel like somebody's doing something just because they're getting paid a lot to make that record or whatever, or because they think it's going to make everybody love them.
But I guess what this person is asking is, back in the day when there was Tower Records, say, would you walk in and not go to a certain section because, like, oh, I'm just not into that kind of music?
Well, I go through phases of things. Like no, I'm real open-minded about music, you know. Mm-hmm. Like I like all types of music, and like I said, I just don't divide it up in my head that way. I like all kinds of things that would, you know, like, there's very few of my friends who would like. I don't think there's any of my friends who would like everything that I like. Like I've just always been like that. I love a huge variety of things, you know.
A reader by the name of Vivi says, 4 years ago, you said that your lyrics were a big joke. Do you still feel the same way?
I think that's being taken out of context. I like to play games with my lyrics and make things that are sort of amusing to me, to offset ideas with other ideas in ways that you never would in normal everyday speech, you know. Ever since I started really having fun writing lyrics, it's always been in a way to sort of put ideas together that seem contrary to one another, or to do things with words, like I said, there would be ways that you'd never be able to put them together in everyday speech, but somehow the ideas are informed by the quality of the music that they're joined with. And just like in poetry, where the meter sort of gives a meaning to the words, I think it happens in an even more powerful way when you're writing lyrics, you know. And I think you should always be having fun when you're doing things. So it's like, they're not ideas that make me laugh or that I think are silly or something. Mm-hmm. They're just ideas that I find amusing and that trigger some sort of an echo in my head that makes me feel good, you know.
Dalgard asks, how much do you play in a particular day? Do you have any kind of set process for your playing?
You know, it's always different. I mean, sometimes I'll spend a lot of time with another instrument besides the guitar, and that'll have just as dramatic of an effect on my guitar as if I was playing guitar. I remember the time we were doing that By the Way album, I was playing piano a lot, and it really helped the way that I saw chords on the neck of the guitar, just because chords make more sense on the piano and you can get a bigger picture of them than guitar, and then you can push yourself with doing certain types of stretches to incorporate the same types of intervals that are really easy to grab on the piano. You can apply those to the guitar, you know. It's always different, but I think about, and also sometimes it's just as good to be thinking about music as to be actually doing it, you know. Sometimes just sitting there listening to music a lot, you can learn just as much from as playing. But when I was a kid, I used to practice somewhere between like 8 and 15 hours a day, and I'm not really any different now, you know. Whether it's on one instrument or the other, or whether it's mixing, or whether it's like messing around with a synth or something, I'm doing music all day long every day. And in the Chili Peppers, I was always just it would be an all day thing for me, you know. It would be like waking up. If we were writing a record, just wake up, you know, practice, go to rehearsal, play for 4 hours, come back, eat dinner, play all night, listen to records. It's all I do. I'm not really too interested in anything else.
I did an interview recently with Chad Smith, who basically said that there was about a year or so before the Chili Peppers were going to be active again. Is that basically the plan?
No, there's no plan.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no plan.
So you guys haven't...
You're going to have to stop the tape recorder.
Okay.
The official, or you can leave it on, and I can just say the official news is just that there is no plans to do anything, and we were on a hiatus of indefinite length.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's just absolutely no plans to do anything, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, we worked really hard for 10 years, and there's other things in life.
Well, I think your new record is fantastic. It's really a great experience.
Cool, man. Thanks so much for your support.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for spending all the time with me here.
Cool, man.